It's time to enter the drone zone with me, James Drone, aka Pure Ambient Drone. So hit that subscribe button, tap that bell, and get ready to synth on.
Hey there, Synth Drones. We're back with episode number 110. 110 episodes of Midnight Synthesizer Talk with me, James Drone,
the voice of synthesizers.
Yeah. Well, I want to talk about Behringer today. And before I do that, I want to mention that on November 4th of this year, 2021, I have been officially on YouTube making videos for 5 years. And I was saving it up until today to mention this because I want to thank all of you who have supported me over the years. It's been a long road. I don't do any type of, advertising or any kind of gimmicks to get any kind of views or anything like that. Not saying that anybody else does that. I'm just me. And these are my synth adventures. They've always been my synth adventures. And this channel has never been about teaching anybody anything. More than anything, it's been about me learning about you, all of you who support me. I love learning about you and how you are using your synthesizers, what you're doing with your music. It's just so interesting to me to be a part of your lives as much as you are a part of my life. And thank you so much for the 5 years so far of support for this channel. I really do mean that. It means a lot to me that so many of you have shown your love over the years to me. That really is warming to my heart. I really appreciate it. So thank you. Today I want to talk about Behringer. Behringer. I've said things similar to this before, what I'm about to say. And I said something about Behringer's big fail. I have a video on that on my channel. And I want to elaborate a little bit about the problems I see with Behringer, because it's not all a bed of roses with Behringer, in my opinion. And I know that there's a lot of channels that are sometimes overly kind to synth companies. Maybe they're hoping that they're going to get a free synthesizer or some kind of endorsement or something. I don't get free gear, and I don't speak for synthesizer companies. I say my experience. I'm not always right either. I never pretend to be always right. But I do have an opinion like anyone else does. So I want to share my opinion with you about Behringer today. Some things that have been bothering me over the years. Before I get started talking on this topic, I want to make something very clear. Please, if you're going to leave a comment, watch, listen, and hear the entire video before you hear something and you jump on it. I'm not trying to be mean to anybody, but way too often I see comments where I just know people did not watch the video, or they wouldn't be leaving the comment that they left. And I've always been taught that if you're going to say something about someone or something, you should have all the information possible, especially if it's going to be a criticism. So if you're going to comment something on this video, please listen to the whole thing, hear it, and be sure you understand where I'm coming from, because this is going to be a long video and there's going to be a lot of territory covered, and it's probably going to get people's emotions flaring. And I mean, that's what we do in a discussion, right? I want to start with early product announcement. One of the biggest things I hear and see in the comment sections, not just on my channel, but other places too, is Behringer promised this synthesizer years ago. Not days ago, not weeks ago, not even months ago, but years ago. Like the Pro 800 was supposed to be out January 2021. They promised that. Now, there have been a lot of things that have affected the release date of that synth that was out of Behringer's control. And there have been other reasons why I think they should have made their promise come true. Now, since they promised that, we have seen the Behringer 2600 released, right? We have seen other synthesizers like the Monopoly released, but we have no Pro 800 yet. Now, I don't want it to sound like I'm Behringer bashing. I don't like to bash anyone or any entity, such as a synth company in this case. That's just not who I am. But after reading so many things about Behringer not making promises come true, I think that a constructive criticism to Behringer would be, let's not promise these things so far out. Let's wait until we're a little bit closer to release date. Now, I get it. They want to get a hype going. They want people to be talking about them. And sometimes negative press is better than no press at all, depending on the negativity. And I truly do believe that many of the people who are complaining about the synthesizers Behringer promises not being here yet, I truly believe they're going to buy that synthesizer when it comes out anyway. And so it's not really going to negatively impact Behringer sales because people are complaining about it not being here yet. In fact, it might even be helping Behringer to sell more synthesizers because of the hype. You know, where's the Pro 800? Okay. And if you read that across several channels and blogs and reviews, it's going to stick in your head that there's a Pro 800 coming from Behringer. So there you have it. There's advertisement. So in Behringer's defense, I understand why they do it. They want people to be talking about their synthesizers way before they ever release them. But in the case of the Pro 800, they did put on one of their social media posts, and I think it might be gone now, that it was going to be out 2021. But again, now I don't get everything right. You, the viewer of this video, you don't get everything right. None of us get everything right. I understand. But putting a date out there for a release of a synth and it's not ready to go when you say it, I think that's a big no-no, and it's something that I think Behringer has already learned not to do. So one of my other criticisms that I had, and I like to call them constructive criticisms because I'm not wanting to bash anyone, and I think these will help Behringer, and I know they subscribe to my channel, and they know that I support any synth company making an effort. So I just want to make that very clear that I'm not trying to be negative. I'm trying to be helpful in a constructive way. I think the other thing is that they're making too many synthesizers with no presets. And I understand why. It's because the original synthesizer that they're cloning, and I use that word very loosely because I don't believe that you can go back 20, 30, 40 years and clone any kind of synthesizer. The technology is totally different. The people involved in it are totally different. I just don't think it can happen identically. Okay. I think that even Korg, with some of the clones that they've been coming out with, I don't believe are 100% accurate. I don't think anybody can do that. That's just what I believe. And I could totally be wrong on that. It's just my opinion. But we're going to use the term clone here very loosely, just so you understand how I feel about it. So they're making a lot of these clones of synthesizers that didn't have presets. The problem with that is that we now live in the 21st century and technology has really caught up with synthesizers, including the analog side of synthesis. And that being said, there are some incredible synthesizers out there right now that are modern takes on the vintage synthesizers that are of yesteryear. Now, I know one person in particular. His name is Junkie XL. I don't know him personally, but I know of him. And he has redone his entire studio. And for the most part, I would say 99% of his synthesizers in his new studio are all modern takes on synthesis. He's still got a mini Moog, okay, but for the most part, everything is up to date and hooked up via USB. So this tells you that the pros, and believe me, I really respect the work that Junkie XL does. The pros are moving into the modern synthesizers, leaving behind these clones and the older stuff, the originals, leaving them behind and opting for newer stuff. You can get a lot of horsepower out of analog synthesizers in this day and age. The reason why cloning makes Behringer money is because they're making these synthesizers look a whole lot like the original. They're adding some modern features, and really the USB and the MIDI is a great upgrade. And they sound very close, I don't think identical, to the original synthesizer that they're trying to clone. And then third, they're priced in such a way that anyone with $1,000 or less dollars can buy one. So that opens up a lot of possibilities. So what I would say to Behringer is try to take some of the stuff that you've learned and build yourself a flagship. I've said this before. I'm saying it again. Build yourself a flagship. Most people would say, well, the DeepMind 12/6 is their flagship. I totally disagree. It's a take on the Juno series, okay? That's what it is. It's just another clone in their version. And that's cool because I think that the DeepMind 12 is the best synthesizer that Behringer has made to date. It's just my opinion. The Monopoly is one of the closest sounding synthesizers I've ever heard from Behringer coming to the sound of the original Korg Monopoly, and I owned one of those. I absolutely love both of the synthesizers, the one from Behringer and from Korg. And would I want the original Korg Monopoly? Yes and no. I mean, over the Behringer. I mean, who wouldn't want the original? But you have to put MIDI into it. It is old. It is bigger. And it's going to need maintenance because it's close to 40 years old. Yeah. So you're going to have problems with older equipment. But you could have problems with any synth. The problem with a Korg Monopoly today is that these things run you well over $2,000. So having a problem with a 2,000 plus synth is no fun whatsoever. And that's why I decided to sell my original Korg Monopoly because, well, you know, it was getting up there in age. It was already up there in age. And I didn't want to have to maintain a 40-something-year-old synthesizer. Okay. So Behringer is bringing these clones back and they're affordable. And that's great. I love that. I love that so many people can afford a synthesizer. Now, here's what I would say. Get yourself a flagship. And if you can't do that, at least add some more bells and whistles to these synthesizers. One of the things that I enjoyed about the Poly D, and I didn't really find it too close to the sound of a Moog. That's why I had to let it go. It just wasn't doing it for me sound-wise. Was that they did have some effects on it, but I didn't like the effects. I didn't like the chorus effect that came with the Model D. I think that a delay on these units would be great. Now, let me clarify what I mean. So I have owned the Behringer MS-1. I have owned the Wasp. I have owned the Cat. And I have owned the Model D. So these in particular, I do want to talk about. They were inexpensive modules, and they didn't have any effects. Now, once you get all of these wired up into, let's say, a casing, like, a case that holds 3 or 4 of these, you've got all these wires running everywhere. You've got all of these choices because there's no presets, and then you have no effects. And so each and every one of these either have to go into a send effects, which means they're all going to be recorded on one track. You're not going to be able to split anything up and EQ them separately. So if you've got one of them running bass duties and one of them lead duties and one of them rhythm duties, you're going to have a problem if they're all going to the same effect unit because they're all going to come out on one track. So that means that you're going to have a mixer. You're going to have multiple effects to go with it. If you want effects, you don't have to have effects. You can have your effects, post-production. I'm not talking about live play here, of course. If you were live playing, you could absolutely run everything through a mixer and get away with that as long as you knew what you were doing in the mixing process, okay? But with that being said, you still need some kind, in my opinion, of effects over the longevity of these synthesizers. So one thing I would suggest to Behringer is I would suggest some kind of delay on all of their synthesizers that they come out with in the future. Now, some of you would say, well, what about reverb? What about chorus? Yeah, all of those are great. I don't really like to record with reverb unless I'm mixing it in for pads and I'm trying to get some kind of an effect using the reverb. Reverb is fine if that's what you want, but I think when you're looking at analog, the option of delay as an effect is such a powerful one that it would be really great if their future synthesizers would come out with delay. And I'm not saying that they don't have any right now because their Odyssey has a delay on it, and so does their DeepMind 12. So it would be great to see some kind of effect, but that's going to push the prices up on these machines. The other problem I have, and I'm really giving them a black eye, I think, in this talk with all of you here today, and I don't mean to give Behringer a black eye. I really don't, because they're doing a great service, because I understand they want to keep the prices down. We got the Behringer K2, right? And that's one I've never owned. But I have owned the MS-20 Mini by Korg, and that's their take on the clone version of it. And it sounded great. It was fantastic. And it had a very dirty filter. It was kind of noisy. And I've never owned the original, MS-20. I never owned the original. So I really can't compare the filter and the noisiness to it. Some say it's normal. Some say it's not normal. The kind of hissing that you would get. With that being said, the Behringer K2, I have never owned one of these either. But it would have been great if they would have included a keyboard with this synthesizer, because this synth in particular begs to be tweaked. It's semi-modular, so you're going to be pushing wires in, blah, blah, blah. It would have been great to have some kind of delay effect on it, along with a keyboard attached, and really just kind of cloned the MS-20 to make it more suitable for what we want out of a clone. And I don't know what their limitations were on that, because Korg is making their own clones of the MS-20. So there could be some trademark / copyright issues with them making it similar to that synth. But they could have added a keyboard to it. It didn't have to look identical to the MS-20. And again, you don't need a keyboard for all of these. But remember when I told you that I had those synthesizers, I had them all in their own little case? Well, guess what? Each and every one of them needed a keyboard to trigger them. So you're going to need multiple keyboards, or at least a keyboard capable of changing MIDI channels on the fly to be able to sequence these synthesizers in real time. So there you have it. So yes, you can put these all in a case, these modules, and stack them up, but you still got to have some kind of triggering device to get them to play for you. And that's the problem. And so that's why I moved away from modules for the most part, because you still have to have a keyboard to trigger them. And if you don't have enough keyboards or the space for enough keyboards, then you're kind of defeating the purpose of having those modules. So once I got all of these Behringer synths wired up inside of their nice little case, they looked great. But I was running out of room to have enough of these keyboards to trigger it. And I didn't want to buy something that would trigger them all individually, which I could have done from my Phantom, but my Phantom is 76 keys, and I would have had to gone over from one side of the room to the other. I mean, to me, it just wasn't worth MIDIing everything up just for keyboard triggering, and no effects on any of these synthesizers. It just kind of killed the workflow for me. But I would say to anybody out there, if you're looking for a great sounding synthesizer and you've only got a few $100s to spare, you can pick from a vast array of sounds now from Behringer, because they're making these synthesizers very affordable. And if you don't need a whole set of modules, then go with one, pick your flavor, and enjoy that. And then you'll be able to have your own little setup of maybe a K2 or a Model D or an ARP, which does have effects. Or you could go for the big gun, the DeepMind 12 or the 6. So there is a lot of great options that Behringer is doing, and I understand why they're doing it. Nobody else was doing what Behringer is doing now. So Behringer actually got a chance to come in and make it happen. Now, I will give kudos to Korg. Korg really did a great job on the MS-20 and their ARP clone as well. Their Odyssey sounds really good, and I had one some time ago. Just not my cup of tea. I like synthesizers with presets. You all know that. I've said it a million times. It's just my workflow. I like to have a starting point to go from. And I'll clarify. Presets are a great way to see what a synthesizer is really capable of doing. And so a lot of the synth demos that I do on here are not just me playing the synthesizer, because you could probably get that from anyone. What I like to do is, in many cases, push the synthesizer and open up the filters, close the filters, just play with all the parameters, as many as I can, to give you a feel of what the power of the synthesizer is capable of delivering. And that's what I like to do, starting from a preset, because honestly, when you have presets available to you, you may be going through them and realize that maybe that synth could do a whistle sound that you've been looking for, but you weren't sure exactly how to get that sound. And I'm just using that as a loose example. But maybe you just didn't want to take the time to experiment. The other reason why I like presets, obviously, is because there's a saving point. If you come up with something you really love, you don't have to twist a knob and worry that it's gone. You can save it. And that is a great feeling of being able to save your presets once you turn off the synth. Of course, a non-preset synthesizer is saved, right? Because all of the knobs are in their position. But as soon as you turn one knob on a no preset synth, you pretty much changed everything. And so there's times that I'll get something great sounding on the monopoly, a really great bass, for instance, because it does bass fantastically. And I got to get a lead out of it or some other tone. And then I got to go back. Now, because I know the monopoly so well, that's great. You know, it doesn't affect me too much because I know how to get there. But if I had multiple synthesizers with no presets, it would become very tiresome very quickly for me, not having a starting point, especially when I just want to sit down and work. So I just want to clarify all that. So what do you guys think about my constructive criticism of Behringer? I don't want any Behringer bashing, because you know what? Every synth company has its problems, okay? And to be fair to Behringer, to say something nice to Behringer right now, right here, I love what they're doing. Somebody had to do it. Maybe you like what Behringer is doing and you don't want them to change a thing. You can leave a comment about that. Maybe there's something I missed and you want to make a comment about that. Behringer and all synth companies need constructive feedback so that customers know what they're wanting. So leave a comment. Tell me how you feel about this topic and what I discussed, and maybe add to it or subtract. I'm James Drone, aka Pure Ambient Drone. Until next time, hit that subscribe button, tap that bell, and above all, keep calm and synth on.